In this lesson, we're going to look at adding decals, some final touches to our model. In order that we're all working on the same thing, if you'd like to go into the sample folders, go into Chapter 10, and open the file named Walkie-talkie Final Lights. So here I have a file very similar to where we left off. I've just tweaked a couple of things. I've adjusted the lighting a little bit more. And I think this will make a really nice basis for setting up our decals. So I'm going to hit the space bar to bring up our project window. Now, whenever I apply my decals, I do like to have the camera set to kind of an orthographic mode. I don't necessarily change the lens to an orthographic setting, but I like to have a nice square view of what I'm working on. So either the front, a side, a top, whatever it is. In this particular case, we'll be adding decals to these buttons and to the face bezel. So I'm going to go into camera, and I can see that this is a negative 112, the angle I'm at. So I know that a negative 180 should put me in the wrong position. And it looks like a negative 180 doesn't work, so let's try negative 90. There we go. My incline, I'm just going to set that to 0 so that I know I'm dead square while I'm working here on my particular model. So I have my 5 buttons here, and what I'm going to do is just double-click this main first button. And I'm going to go to the Label tab. So I'll just double-click right here. And now we have all of our decals that I've created. These are all just, for the most part, PNG files created in Photoshop with transparent backgrounds. I do have a couple of JPEGs in here for the screens. I use PNGs mostly just because I do get that transparency for free. That way, in the case of, let's say, this plus sign, I won't have a white box around it when I apply it to the button. It'll just be the actual plus sign itself. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to add this channel and power to this center button here. Now, right now, nothing shows up. I need to give it a location. So when this button is blue like this, that means I can just click and sort of drag. Now, we're not seeing anything, and I just happen to know that the decal is just way too large. So I'm going to just type in a number here, and I'll start with a 0.2 and see if that gives us anything. And it gives us an indication, so I've made this a little smaller. Let's try a 0.1, 0.05. And now, because this is still blue, I could just drag around to visually move this. Now, let me move this out of the way. Now, if you're having a problem with your screen redrawing, depending on how powerful your computer is, set it to what's called performance mode. So if I press Alt and P, you'll see a little Alt P show up here. And what that does is it stops trying to redraw everything. Now on these metallic buttons, it's still going to kind of redraw as I'm moving things around, but it does sort of minimize a lot of kind of what's going on there. So I think that looks pretty good. A wee bit off center there. There we go. Now that's very bright, as you can see, and my buttons are kind of a brighter color. So what I can do is actually go down to Label Intensity. I like to make my buttons kind of a medium gray because by changing this intensity, I can either make them white or I can make them very dark. So if I go to a 0.5 with this, now you can see it really starts to pop. And 0.3 will make it even pop a little more. Now when you're doing this normal projection, which is the mode we're going to project all of our decals, unfortunately there's no center button or anything like that. So you've got to kind of visually do this. So I think that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to put another button here. And actually, these 4 buttons are going to be a different material. The 4 buttons share a material, but it's going to be different than this main button here. So that's why I double-clicked. You can see there's no buttons applied to this material. If I double-click on this, go back into Material Edit for this button, and click on Labels, now you see there is. So again, I'll double-click one of those buttons, double-click Label, and this time I'm going to choose Menu. We'll make this the Menu button. So blue button here on the position, and I can just click there. You can see it's way too large again. I'll make that a 0.05. That's actually not a bad size. Let's go ahead and turn the intensity of that down to a 3 as well. I can see that a little bit better, and then we can just kind of drag that to its right location. That looks pretty good. Now I want to add another label to this, so here I will go over and add label. I'll click on this sound icon. Notice I've got blue here, so I can click right there. And we're not seeing anything for that one, but I'll type in a 0.02. That may even be a little small on that. Let's bring that up just a bit. And let's make that a 0.3 as well. I'm going to add another label, so I click the plus, add label. This time I'm going to put the plus sign, and I'll put that right there. Let's make that a 0.02. Seems to be working. Let's change the intensity of that to a 0.3. There we go. 0.25. I may go up to a 0.3 on that size. Yeah, that's not so bad. Whenever I'm doing plus or minus, I do want the plus on top. It just logically works out for me. And when they add another label, this time we'll add the minus sign. Position, click the mouse right about the center. Make that a 0.3. I'm sorry, 0.03. And let's change that to a 0.3 under intensity. And let's just drag that just a little. I think that looks pretty good there. Now if I go back under my camera, I'll choose V2. And the scene's looking pretty good. I think adding those decals really makes the object look a lot more realistic. And we'll continue to add the rest of the decals in the next lesson.